Well, welcome everyone to our next Alumni Rebound Podcast. We are joined by Mary Elizabeth Minns today. I would argue a good friend and a great former JMU student. When we came up with this idea, there were names that kept popping up, and the first name I put on the list was this one. So it's taken us a while to get here, but I'm glad we can spend a little bit of time talking. So welcome. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me. I feel so honored.
Well, we're excited. So let's start with this. Why don't you tell us, I already said your name and all that, but why don't you give us background, where are you originally from? Tell us about your JMU experience. What did you do when you were here, when you graduated, and then tell us where you live and what you're doing now.
Okay, well, yes, I'm Mary Elizabeth. Mary. I am from Portsmouth, Virginia. While I was at JMU, I was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. I was 2 years an RA. I also led an alternative break to Jamaica in my last year. I was a communications major, WRTC, and Soci Sci minor. Also was in the sociology club for a period of time. And I just graduated 2020. I am now in the good old state of Alabama. I live in Montgomery, but I teach second graders in Selma, Alabama, for my 2-year commitment to Teach for America, Alabama.
Amazing. So let's talk about that. These all have been in different orders and I sort of jump all over the place. So let's talk about, how did you end up in Selma, Alabama with Teach for America?
Yes, so a couple of my sorors had already done Teach for America, so I had heard of the name and I was like, oh, that's cool, but I could never teach. And I had actually spoke to the JMU recruiter, and I really was like, okay, this could be an option. At the time, I was preparing to go to law school, but said, I don't know if I'm quite ready for that next step yet. And I completed the process. And as I was going through the 3 rounds that you go through to get into TFA, I started really getting into the mission, the one day all kids, the belief that all kids have the potential, but not all of them have that opportunity, really stuck with me. And I completed the process, and Alabama selected me to be here. And as I was getting hired, I really was touched by the community of Selma and was very happy to be hired at Meadowview Elementary, um, and placed to be a second grade teacher. For them to trust me with their babies was a huge opportunity for me.
Yeah, but well deserved. So talk to me about when did you know that you had it? Like, when did you actually find out that you got Teach for America?
December 2019, actually on the 5th. I remember it very vividly because, ironically enough, I was doing a presentation for an SCOM class that I was taking at the moment, and I just checked my phone and I saw "Welcome to the Bamily." Took all my energy not to cry because I needed to give a presentation at that moment.
And then did you know when you got that, you're like, this is it, I'm not looking at anything else, everything else I had on the, that was possible, I'm saying no to? I mean, that was it.
110%. I looked at it. The first gut reaction was yes. The second was, I have to tell my mother. But as soon as she was okay with it, which was honestly later on that night, I had accepted my offer that day, I think less than 5 hours. I was ready to come on down here, and me and my mom, we changed our Christmas plans. We flew down here and we just drove all around Alabama just to get a feel of where I would be calling my next home after JMU.
Wow. All right, so then let's talk about the transition process. We're going to come back and talk a lot about graduation and your last semester and all that, but let's talk about post-grad. So you graduate. When did you start? Like, what did you do from graduation to when the job started? Sort of what did that summer look like? And then what did the whole moving to a totally different place you'd never done anything but visit before look like? Can you take us through that sort of life transition?
Oh, those like 4-ish months from quote unquote graduation to actually being down here in Bama was a trip. So um after graduation, finish of classes and everything else, I had about a month resting period. Um, TFA, we have this onboarding process where you basically get familiar with those who are in your region, the staff members at TFA that you will be working with, as well as getting familiar with the community. And down here in Bama, it's a really big thing because it's basically the birthplace of civil rights in many ways. And so a lot of our onboarding process was understanding the history of civil rights here and what that means to the communities that we would be working with. After that process, it was, well, okay, how do you teach? Because a lot of those of us who are selected for Teach for America were not in education, maybe minored in it, but not necessarily in it directly. And so we spend a month-long process of learning how to teach, which is usually called institution, but for me, it was called virtual summer teacher training. And during that time, I ironically tutored a little kid. His name I can't say, but his dad went to JMU. And that was very touching for me to be able to touch a future little Duke during my virtual summer teacher training. Um, After that process, I was hired by Selma City Schools, and TFA gets us in the process of getting down here. So for me and a couple of my other core members was actually relocating states, getting us connected with realtors and making sure that we have everything that we need as far as praxis scores, temporary certification for Alabama to even be able to teach, as well as enrolling in grad school, because that's part of the teacher certification process. Um, I officially moved down here July 16th with my mom and my goddad, packed up my U-Haul, bought all my furniture down here and had it delivered the next day. I have relocated from where I originally moved to. I'm now in Montgomery. I was in Marion. I felt like Montgomery fit me a little bit more, but yeah, I think that is, yep, that was everything that took me to get down here. It was really rough process because doing everything virtual, because you can't necessarily travel during COVID and everything else, it impacted it, but I was still determined to be down here and continue the mission of TFA and honestly, low-key kind of JMU with giving back to the community. Being
Right. So I feel like I already know this answer, but I'll ask anyway. What did going to Selma and all that, how much did that play into your desire to say yes when you got this? Like you knew that immediately or you didn't know that yet?
I knew that I would be in Bama. And so that meant I would either be in Birmingham or Selma or the Perry County, Greensboro area, but not specifically Selma.
Okay. But did location matter to you or you were just excited about TFA? I mean, because here's the reason why I'm asking this is I'm hoping that this podcast will be listened to by a lot of people, but also by people maybe in TFA. So I want to help those because we're gonna let them know that you're in Teach for America as part of posting this. So I want you to help them think through the decision-making process because there are people who really want TFA, but then are unhappy about where they're going, or vice versa. So I'm just wondering, sort of location, TFA, what were the deciding factors for you that this was? I mean, you said yes 5 hours later. That's not a totally normal experience with a TFA offer. So I'm just wondering sort of what goes into that for you.
So honestly, a bunch of things. And I'll tell you a little bit of my thought process afterwards looking back. So my first choice was Atlanta.
Mm.
And my second and third was Memphis and Nashville. Atlanta was actually number 7 for me. I mean, Alabama was actually number 7 for me. Um, and so when I got the offer and I was all happy about it, looking back, I'm like, why was I so excited? And I think now it's because of my why for joining TFA. My why is my dad and myself. My dad was a foster child in New York until he was adopted by his mother, that I'm named after. Um, and he never graduated high school until he actually came and visited me at JMU and attended one of my classes, and it encouraged him to go get his GED. And he got his GED and then took some college courses, but he had a rough time in school. Me, on the other hand, I had everything, as far as like access, opportunity, but I didn't have everything up here. I was dealing with ADHD as well as dyslexia. So reading came very hard for me. They just looked like really weird squiggly lines. Um, and so I had both sides of what a lot of kids face in my past history. My dad, who was dealing with a lot of systemic issues in his education, and me, who was dealing with a lot of like self um, difficulties when it came to my education. How does that play in Alabama though? Because you could say, well, that's the same thing in Atlanta, right? My dad, who a lot of people don't know, was a civil rights leader in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Um, and he spoke out and fought very hard until he passed for the rights of Brown and Black people in our area. Um, and for me, the civil rights era and education and knowing that history was very big for my dad. And I've known it since I was little. He actually had visited down here in Birmingham and Selma. And so I knew it felt like home when me and my mom came to visit because I had already known of this place, even if I had never been here before. It was just something that I could imagine as this birthplace of fighting for the rights of people who look like me, my mom, my dad, my brother, and future all my kids.
Right.
And so that's honestly what made me say yes in 5 hours. Is it everybody's first pick? No, but I would say to anybody who's looking at TFA and focusing on that location piece, I want you to really reflect on, why do you want to do TFA? Because if your mission is to pursue the one day goal of all kids and helping them get that opportunity, then location, yes, it can be a concern as far as like your headspace and what you need to function, because you have to take care of yourself first. But also you have to consider, can you go in those rural spaces where these kids really need quality leaders in front of them? And granted, we're not the solution, we're not the answer, but we're helping support those in the community to help them reach their solution, their answer to the problems that are in the education system.
Sure. That's great. I appreciate that answer. And you may have just given us the theme for this, which is focus on your why, not your where. Because I just think that so many people get stuck on the details that don't actually matter.
Yeah.
So let's talk about life post college. What have been sort of the biggest differences for you from JMU to now real life adulting, whatever you want to call it? What are maybe those 3 to 5 things that you're like, this is totally different than what the college life was like?
Whew, I hope some JMU Dukes are listening to this. I need you all to go and say thank you to your RAs, your professors, your advisors, everyone who keeps your life structured. Because when you graduate, that is all you, baby boom. You have to make sure that you have lunch, you brought your groceries, dishes are washed, everything else, in addition to all your daily tasks at work. And even at work, things may not be structured for you. And I know for me, that was a smack in the face, because at ORL, we pretty much have, I won't say everything's handed to us. We have a lot of creative liberties. We have some scheduling we need to do on our own, but pretty much you're given step by step instructions on how to do it. And I was not used to that. not having that structure and like, oh, Mary, you can decide the structure of how all of this goes. Um, I think that was the biggest thing that was like, okay, you're an adult now. After that, just trying to be a little bit of a forward thinker. I'm usually kind of good at that, but I've even had to push myself more because I am down here by myself. My family and all support system is in Virginia. I moved down here without knowing anybody. Kind of rare for most college grads,
Sure.
but I said I wanted that challenge. But yeah, I would say post grad is just getting used to being out of my JMU bubble is
Yeah.
the biggest thing.
Okay. So let's stick with the JMU bubble for a second. How about friends, both friends from JMU? Have you and how have you stayed in touch or not? And then how have you made new friends and connections and communities since you've left?
So my JMU friends, I think we stay in touch a fairly good amount. We have a lot of bad things to say about COVID, but I will say the one thing that COVID pushed me to do personally was to keep those connections. To make sure I check in on my friends, like, oh, I haven't talked to this person in 2 weeks. I remember they were having a rough time. Let me just send a text to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. One thing I did Valentine's Day, I sent Valentine's Day cards to every and anybody who I had their address for. I even every now and then send emails to my professors just to say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I really had some time, and maybe it's not even more so COVID, but just being down here, it's made me think of all those people that I valued at JMU and Virginia, period, and wanting to make sure that they knew that
Mm.
I think about you, I love you, I care about you, even if I don't talk all the time. As far as down here, that's been a little bit of a challenge, but persevering, we're figuring things out. I made sure when I came down here that being in a Divine Nine sorority, I wanted to keep that connection. And so I am a part of Lambda Eta Sigma, chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. It is housed in Birmingham, so I get to get connected to some Birmingham sorors as well as some sorors who are in Selma and Montgomery, where I am. And outside of sorority life, also have my TFA connection. So I think my closest friend, her name is Briche. She lives around the corner from me. And outside of that would be my family at Meadowview Elementary School. We are very much so the lion bunch over there. So I went from being a Duke dog to a lion. um, so getting connected to my Meadowview family has been a big deal for me, because they have really kind of took me under their wing. I'm the youngest one in the building, and so I'm like the little sister of the family.
Yep.
But yeah.
Okay. And then talk about, let's do some lessons learned. Any things that you've looked back, you said, well, that didn't really go the way I thought it would after graduation, or, I really wish I'd done this or done that, or I don't want to say regrets or mistakes, but more like, oh yeah, that was not my best adulting moment or things like that. Any thoughts on any of that?
Okay. So this may be more of a Mary thing, but there's probably someone else out there who's just like me. When you get graduation money, you get really excited. Or when you're thinking about getting a new apartment, you get really excited. Like, I get to decorate. I get to make this space my own. Pause. Pause, take a breath, just get into the space, get used to the flow. Because I think I fell in the trap of pre-planning a little too much. And I bought some things that are now no longer in my possession. And I've only been down here 8 months. So just, even actually, you know what? Taking a step back from decorating or even thinking about apartments and stuff, just in life in general, take a step back. Even if the puzzle seems completely filled in and you're missing one piece, just breathe for a second. Don't get too ahead of yourself because you may mess around and trip and fall. Um, I think that's probably my biggest takeaway is because I was really just like, go, 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 go. And I needed someone to say, hey, pause. You can breathe. You don't need to jump and do the first thing that you see.
Right. And you said also that you've already moved once.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
So, okay. Um, I can. It's going to be funny. I think I look back on it, it's become a running joke between me and my mom. Um, when I got hired in the middle of virtual summer teacher training, actually somewhat towards the end, but I knew it was like 2 weeks before I was supposed to move. And I went to a full-fledged panic because I have never had an apartment. I lived on campus all 4 years. That was all ORL decided that for me. I didn't have to decide that. And so finding an apartment, putting the down payment, all that, it was starting to freak me out. And especially in a whole another state, I was like, whoa, I don't know what to do here. And so, in many ways, I called one realtor. She found one place. It had a sunroom. And I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I look back at that like, you probably should have looked around some more. And I think it's funny because Briche, my friend down here who lives around the corner, she said, Mary, do you want me to look in Montgomery? Like, I can go look at the apartment. And I was like, oh no, I've already placed a down payment in another place in Marion, had never seen it, only saw it through pictures and like catty cornered videos of the place. But because I was so excited and nervous, scared, all these emotions just up and jumped, and it was not the place for me. I needed to think more about, okay, you're in another state. What are the basic things that you are going to need, and how far away are you willing to be away from them?
Right.
Um, and that's ultimately what put me here in Montgomery, is because I needed somewhat similar to the structure I was used to at JMU, and the place where I moved was not. So,
Okay.
yeah.
But again, good lesson learned. Also a good lesson for those that will listen to this that are about to graduate. So let's transition to the last sort of theme here, which is I want you to think back to March 22nd of your own senior year. And I want you to provide some insight, advice, perspective to everyone else who's at March 22nd of their senior year. What do you wish you had known? What do you want them to know? Like, you've given some really great nuggets here today, but are there other things that you're like, man, in March I was freaking out about this, or this, or what do you want them to know?
To breathe and go sit on the quad and go to your favorite place to eat on campus. Do prioritize enjoying your time at JMU. As my friends will say, they've always said, I've been the biggest JMU fan, but since I have left, all they've heard me say is, I miss JMU. I miss JMU. I miss JMU. And granted, for my graduating year, I didn't know that March 22nd, when I actually moved out of my dorm, was it. I just knew we were going to come back, have the last month. I was going to go get me some sticky nugs and go lay on the quad, and it was going to be cool. But that never happened. And so, anybody, your senior year, the pictures, the cap, the gown, the test, the exam, the projects, yes, granted, they are important, but also just living in that moment of being a JMU Duke for the last few days, take that in, enjoy all that you can, all your friends, being able to see them, because it may seem like, oh, yeah, girl, we'll get together after graduation. And yeah, you will, but it'll be hard.
Mhm.
You know, my core friend group, I'm in Bama, one's in Northern Virginia, Southern Virginia, and one's in the islands. So we're literally all spread apart and fighting to see each other. So enjoy while y'all are just minutes away from each other. Enjoy the quad. Please enjoy the quad.
Well, I will tell you, they are. The quad is very, very beautiful and very busy right now. Um, well, Mary Elizabeth Mins, folks, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for the legacy you left at JMU. Thank you for the difference you're making in Selma, Alabama with Teach for America. And I'm glad we got to have the time to have this conversation. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Dr. Miller. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, hopefully you will share this with lots of people and they'll hear your wise words. But thanks for taking the time and we'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Awesome. Will do.
Okay. Thanks.
Bye.